Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Bobby here. So today's video is a question I got in my Instagram DM from Sloan, and he was asking if I could do this effect right using Cinema 4D. Right. So when I saw this, I was initially thinking of the collision deformer, but then if you watch it carefully, you can see some of the like the collisions or the dents intersect when there are two spheres or something, right? Can see here, you can see there's an intersection. So I was thinking maybe it wasn't just collision deformer, but maybe there was something else, right? So I don't know if this was done in Cinema 4D or even if in Cinema 4D used a third-party plugin or something. But let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will do something similar to this using both the collision deformer and then another method, right? So I'm in Cinema 4D and I'm using Cinema 4D 2023.1. But we are going to do the collision deformer technique first, and with that one you should be able to do it with almost every Cinema 4D version that you have, right? So I'll come into my object in here and I'll create a sphere, and let's actually animate the sphere, the scale of the sphere. So at frame 0 we set the scale to 0, 0, 0 and set a keyframe for it, and at frame 25 we bring it back to 1. We bring it back to 1 by 1, set a keyframe, and at frame 26, just immediately after 25, we set it back to 0, 0, 0 and set a keyframe. So now if I hit play, you can see it scales up and this it scales back to 0, disappears quickly. So that's what we are going to use as the size of our sphere, right? And now if I select the sphere, let's reduce the size a bit. I'll set it to like say 35, which is fine. So we are going to use the collision deformer technique, and all you need is the object you want the sphere to collide with, and in this case a torus. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'll use a plane for us to quickly get the technique. So now I'll come in here and I'll create a plane, right? So this is the object we want the sphere to collide with instead of the torus, right? So now let's change the display from garage shading to garage shading with lines. And also I don't like the grid of our in the scene, so I'll come into filters and I'll check work plane. So now with the collision deformer, you need a lot of segments for your object to collide properly. So I'll select the plane and increase its width and height segment to 100 by 100, which is fine. In fact, the sphere itself, I also increase increase the segment a bit to get it a little bit more smoother. All right, I think 45 will be fine in this case. And now I'll come into my deformers. Now that we are done with the like the segments, we are cool, we can come back garage shading. You can simply type NA and it will go, and NB to bring it back. So now I'll come into my deformers and I'll choose the collision deformer. I'll make it a child of the plane and select the collision deformer. Come to the attribute manager in the collider tab. We drag and drop our sphere in there, and you can see now it's intersecting with our plane, right? If I move the sphere, so it doesn't know how to intersect. So let's select the collision deformer and change the solver from intersect to outside. So now our sphere can push it a little bit more further, right? So we are a little halfway there, right? Now when our sphere intersects, we want, so if you can see in the original video, you can see we have at the edges it sort of swells up, like it gets a bump in there. So we want that bump, and to do that you can simply select the collider collision deformer, come to the object tab here, the fall off, you change it from none, and I'll choose one of these. In my case I'll choose surface, right? And when you change it to surface, you can see we have access to the curve here, and now we can, if we select the curve and move it up, you can see the the tip of where the collision begins to swell up. So that's exactly what we want. So now I can even try to bring it up here somewhere, actually something like this. I can select this, and if you want, you can actually right click and say show in separate window, and now you can have it on your own so that you can expand it and now have access, adjust it properly. So I can select this and set it to the y point to 0, right? And now let's move it. In fact, set the y point to 0 somewhere here, and I'll make this one 0.2 or maybe 0.3. All right, still not enough. Let's increase this a little bit more. So basically, you get the idea. Let's even push it a bit. Select this particular point, 0.4. Yeah, so I think 0.4 is fine. And all of this is dependent on the segment you have on your scene. The more the segment, the smoother it looks, right? So you can see the collision deformer. Now, if I take the sphere, move it up and bring it in, you can see you have that edge, like that thing at the edge, right? You can even increase the strength. So I select the collision deformer. I can increase the strength of it a bit, all right? And now you can increase our segment and all of that. So this is what I was thinking initially. So now let's animate it. Another thing I did was, if I select the sphere and set the position at frame 0, right? Let's move the sphere up like that. Oh, actually, let's leave it. If I hit play, you can see the sphere gets big and it disappears. But the dent quickly also disappears, right? So for the dent slowly fades back to its side. You can select the collision deformer in the object tab again. Let's reduce the restore shape to, like, say 1. And now if I hit play, you can see it gets it, and now it gradually formed back, but it doesn't reverse back like in the in this particular video. You can see this one is smoothly, it reversed the whole thing back. So I don't know if it was done using the standard Cinema 4D style, but then this is what I tried initially, and I realized it wasn't really working. But if this is something that you want to use, it's also something you can use, and depending on what you want. So I tried something different, a new scene here, and I'll actually come in here and I'll copy the same sphere animation we did in here initially. So I'll select edit, copy, and I'll come to my new scene and I'll say edit, paste, right? But with this technique, there's a part where you definitely need it has to be done in Cinema 4D 2023.1 or 2023, because that's when you can actually add vertex map directly to generator objects. I mean, so now that we are in a new scene, let's actually come in here and now let's create the same thing. I'll create the torus, right? Let's straight away, I'll make the torus a bit maybe 150, right? So this is going to be the surface that we are going to clone on. So I'll call this one clone, right? And now let's come into my object. I'll create a clone. I'll make the torus the sphere a child of the cloner. Select the cloner and change the mode from object, from grid to object, and the object we want to clone on is the torus, right? So we have our objects created. For now, let me make it like, say, 15, and now select the clone and make sure reset coordinate is unchecked so that the animation can play, right? Everything is working. But in this case, I don't want it to pop out quickly like that. So I'll select the last keyframe and extend it to, like, say, frame 50. So you can see scales up and scales off, right? And now what you are going to do is that I'll come here into my in fact, let's make sure we have enough segments with the torus. So I'll select it, increase the segment so that it's smoother, right? And now let's come into our objects. I'm going to use volume builder. So I'll create a volume builder, make the torus a child of the volume builder, right? And I'll select the volume builder, reduce the voxel size to 2 for now because we are working doing it to recording the scene. In fact, let's make it 3 so that it will be faster. And now let's come in here, the volume builder. You can simply drag and drop in our clone, right? And now if we hit play, let's wait for it to come on. You can see our spheres are coming on, which is fine, but we don't want it to, like, in union, like we want it to subtract it from the volume builder. So we select the clone, like the union, change it from union to subtract, and now we can even hide our clones. So you can see if you hit play, it subtracts it from our volume builder, right? But we don't get the bump at the edge. So what I'll do is that I'll come in here into the volume and I'll create a volume measure, make the volume builder a child of the volume measure, and now we have a real geometry, right? So if I hit play, you can see it subtracts, right? But we want the bump at the end, and it all goes back smoothly. But now let's do the same thing. Let's offset the animation of all the spheres. So I'll select the clone, come to my effectors, and I'll choose either of them, the step, or let me actually use the random again. Select the random. We don't want to affect position, so I'll uncheck affect position and increase time offset to like 50 again. And now if I hit play, you can see it comes on at different times, right? And now we are cool. We are first of all getting our animation like our sphere intersecting and cutting out. In fact, you can increase the size of our sphere to like 40. All right, and now it's working fine. Cool. Now how do we get the bump at the edge here so that it looks like, but one thing you can see is that when two of the spheres meet, you can see it's a cutout, right? Like in this video, I don't know, where two spheres meet, you can see that there usually is a cut. You can see here a cutout. So we are somewhere like, and this is what exactly I wanted. So now that we are cutting our spheres out, how do we get the bump? So to do that, in Cinema 4D 2023.1, I don't know, but I think 2023 or 2023.1, you can simply add vertex map straight onto generators. I mean, so I can right click on my mesher and I'll come to other tags and I'll add vertex to my volume measure, right? And you can see it all turns red, which is fine. Now I'll select the vertex map and the same volume measure which has the vertex map on. I'll drag and drop it in the vertex map field here, right? And you can see everything turns yellow. But then I want the edges where they intersect, and with that there is a mode. If you come down here, there is this mode called curvature. So I'll set to curvature, and now I can see the edges where they intersect. There is this curvature. If it's set to convex, now it has this yellow. So now we are going to use deformer to affect these edges, but you can see it's also affecting the other. It's not as smooth, right? There's a bit of yellowish in the other parts of our volume measure. So to do that, I'll first of all select this vertex map and I'll come into basic and I'll name it vertex map. I'll add 1, right click on it again, come to other tags, I'll choose vertex map again, and I'll move this one back like so. This one comes first, and now this one, and I'll call this one vertex map 2, and I'll make sure use fields is checked. Come to the fields tab and I'll drag in the vertex map 1, right? And I can see it's brought in it in here. We can actually come here and change it from nearest to average, right? So the average will basically smoothen our vertex map. I'll set it to like 10, and I can see it gives it a little bit of smoothness there. And now I can also add like a curve in here. I can add a curve on top of our vertex map and make sure it's well contrasted like that, right? Something like this. So we are going to use this vertex map to drive a deformer to deform this particular volume measure. All right, and the vertex the deformer we are going to use is actually the plane effector. We are not going to use the displacement effector. So I'll come into I'll first of all create a null, make the volume measure a child of the null, right? And then I'll come in here and I'll create a plane effector, also make it a child of the same null with the volume measure, right? So because they are siblings, now if I use it the plane deformer as a plane effector as a deformer, it can affect the volume measure. So now I can come into my plane effector, the deformer tab, and I'll say check point, and you can see it starts deforming our volume measure, right? But we will come into the parameters of the plane effector. I'll set the y to 0, and what we want to affect is z. So let's affect the z like say 15, and I can see the whole thing swells like that, and that's because it's moving them when you move it on the Z, it's moving them by their normals, right? And the normals are phased Z, so every one of them will move like the direction of their normals. That's how come it's working. So now that it's moving, we don't want to move the whole thing. We just want to move only the edges, and we are going to use the vertex map to drive that. So I select the plane effector, come to the fields tab, and I'll drag and drop in the second vertex map that we created. But you can see it didn't work. All right, the edges are not being affected. Everything has gone, disappeared, and that's because you have to make sure the first vertex map we created, use deform point is unchecked, right? And come to the second one as well, make sure use deform point is also unchecked. And now I can see, if I click away, you can see now it's pushing away the edges of our where the intersection happens. I think the 15 is too much, so I'll select the parameters here and I'll reduce it to like maybe 10, or I think let's make it 8 to see. So now if I hit play and see, it comes in. Now as it's moving out, you can see it's not smooth though. So to get it to get like to be a bit smoother, we can come in, either use so let's first of all go into the volume measure and add a bit of smoothness on top. Right, it's too much, so I'll reduce the voxel distance to like say 1. So because you added the smoothness, let's see. So because we added the smoothness to it, let's increase the plane Z size to 15 to see how it looks. Right, maybe we can increase it to 20. Right, and I think it's a bit okay, but it's still not smooth enough. Maybe I can select the volume measure and increase the voxel distance to like 2. So basically, and it's not smoother enough. What we have to do is to increase the voxel, reduce the voxel size. Let me set it to 2 to see how it looks. But because I'm recording, I don't want it to be very dense, so that so you can see when I reduce it to how it looks. So if you even reduce it further to like say 1 or even a bit further down, it will get smoother and you get the animation. But because of the tutorial, I don't, and for things to play out, so we can see, that's why I set it to 2, or actually 3. All right, so now I can see you get the idea. So now if I hit play, and with the smoothness, if I hit play, it will kind of be slow, but it works. Like it gives you something similar to this effect. So if you add enough details, you can actually create something similar. So now I can see our thing, it gets, the dents are created, and if 2 of them comes together, it will actually collide or intersect and create that field, because it's based on the vertex map and the volume builder. Right, so this is basically another technique or another trick I figured, or I tried and I realized. So you can see here, right, you can see here, right, where there's 2 this thing, it intersects and collides and everything. And if I reduce the voxel size to 2, it gets a bit cleaner. Right, can even reduce it even further to 1, and get a bit cleaner. So this is the second technique I tried and it worked. So after this is done, what you can simply do is that bake your volume measure if you are sure of animation and everything. You can also go ahead and add, like say, come into my deformers and I'll add the smoothing deformer here. Right, and I'll probably increase it the iteration to like maybe 30 to give it a bit further smoothness. Right, so basically, and select the volume measure, set it to like probably 1. Just want to see how things looks like with details, and also maybe with the plane effector, reduce it to like probably 15. And simply right click and say bake as Alembic, and you can get it. And after that, when you are done baking it, let's quickly select the plane vector. I think let's select the voxel. Let's bring it back to 2 because it's too slow. All right, I think, yeah, this is fine for now. But like I said, if you're working in real project and you want it to be smooth, you can reduce it to 1, adjust the smoothness of your voxels and everything, and now when you're done, you can simply right click. Let's say we assume this is fine, and right click and see bake as Alembic, right? So let me actually quickly bake it for us to get the idea. So now that like I've baked the Alembic, you can see it's baked here. Now disable our volume measure and all the things that we don't need, even the plane and the smoothing deformer, and disable it for now. And now if you can see our volume measure place our Alembic place a bit smoother in here, right? So in fact, you can actually enable the smoothing a bit more. So now that we have it, you can simply enable our clone, so you can see it aligns with it, right? But like I said, you don't want so in this case, now we can select the clone and the sphere animation. You can drag it from 0 to frame 25, the last frame, and now it comes up like that. It can disappear, and this one smoothly goes up, right? So you can see animation comes on, and this one pops, but smoothly goes off. So that's basically the second idea I came up with, and that's how, or that's what the 2 ways I figured out, I thought of for now. Maybe there might be other ways, right, that you can do this, but this is the 2 ways that I could think of in the moment when I actually was playing around with it this morning, right? So I hope this video was useful and you've learned something from it. So if you want to get the similar feel with the like the spheres, right? Let me actually move it. The spheres, you can also put the spheres in a volume measure. You can create a volume measure and now put the clone in the volume measure for it to be where the 2 spheres intersect. For instance, in this case, right, you can put it in a volume measure so that you get the blending of the spheres as well, and that one will work. But this was to show you that the idea when I was playing with it this morning, how you can get something similar to this effect. And I hope this video was useful when you've learned something from it. I wasn't thinking this video would take this long, but then yeah, because it was experimental, I couldn't predict certain things. So thank you for watching, and if you have any question, you can ask in my Instagram DM like Sloan did, right? And if I have any idea, I can actually try and play around with it and do a video tutorial on it. Thank you for watching. Share this video if you think it's helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.